Okay, good evening and welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the town of Eastchester. This is our June meeting. Tonight is Wednesday, June 13, 2024, and we begin our meetings with a Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Before we call roll, I usually take this time to go over some of the ground rules for our meetings, and I'll do that again tonight. Firstly, we follow Robert's Rules of Parliamentary Order, which essentially every government and quasi-government agency follows. Simply, I guess the abridged version of it is that we take action based on motion, vote, and resolution, and that parties will have an opportunity to address the board when approved by the chair. Additionally, I've been making this comment the last several meetings because of people who submit information and documentation online. It's very important that people realize that no new correspondence is accepted on any applications once the public hearing is closed. So people have an opportunity to send in emails. We have a public hearing as a general rule on new applications, and once we close that, you have an opportunity to be heard, and that's it. So you can't be heard after that. And while we're on that topic with new applications, as a general rule, we have the applicant give a summary of their presentation. You don't need to sit here and read the full test. You can if you want. It's not going to hurt or help your application. Your application and all of the exhibits are marked submitted. Generally, the board will then have an opportunity to ask questions or make comments. The public will have an opportunity to be heard, and we generally allow the applicant to reply to any public commentary. And certainly there are variations off of that, but that's generally how these new matters are heard. Before I call the roll, I just want to make a motion to approve the minutes of the May 14, 2024 meetings. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor? Aye. Okay. We have two items on our calendar tonight that are adjourned on consent. One is 360 White Plains Road. The other is 249 Main Street, which is also known as 27 New Street. Those items have been adjourned. Before we get to our new business items, we have 4 items on our resolution calendar tonight. Item number 1, I believe there's a motion on the floor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to adopt a resolution granting the requested variances for application 24-10, 3 Lucille Place, subject to the following conditions. 1. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the proposed plan shall be reviewed by the town's consulting civil engineer, and any comments raised by him shall be addressed by the applicant to ensure that adequate stormwater mitigation measures are provided. And 2, the proposed improvement shall be installed in compliance with the plans reviewed at the board's May 14, 2024 meeting, subject to any revisions required by the town's consulting engineer.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there a second to Mr. Miller's motion?
Second.
Mr. Weber. Okay, to the vote. Mr. Cahalan?
No.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
I vote no. The application's been approved 3-2. Okay, next item, number 2 on the resolution calendar. I make a motion to adopt the resolution granting the requested variance as submitted by application 24-12, which is 64 Hickory Hill Road. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, to the vote. Mr. Cahalan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
I vote yes. That's been approved 5-0. Item number 3, I make a motion to adopt the resolution granting the requested variances as submitted for application 24-13. That's 20 Dogwood Drive. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, go to the vote. Mr. Cahalan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
I vote yes. That's been approved 5-0. Last item, I make a motion, I should say, to adopt the resolution granting the requested variances as submitted for application 24-15, that's 42 Glen Road. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Miller, to the vote. Mr. Cahalan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
I vote yes. 5-0. That's been approved. Thank you. Okay. Now, on to new business. We have 2 items of new business. When I call out your matter, I would like the applicant to come up and give me your name and address for the record and proceed with your presentation. First item is application 24-14, that's 6 Sprague Road. This is, while you're getting ready, this is a seeker type 2 action. There's no further review required under seeker.
Hello, Dan Sherman, landscape architect, representing 6 Sprague Avenue. This is Jason Malik, the homeowner. I have a panel that I could put on the easel.
Please do.
It's not new information, I just enlarged the photos just for clarity.
That's great, particularly for those viewing at home. That's good.
Can the camera see it here?
Mhm.
Do you project the drawings?
We do.
We do.
Typically, is there someone behind the camera?
Is it possible that you can project the images from the...
Yeah. Okay.
Am I giving my age away if I call it an easel?
No,
I think that's what it's called.
No,
That's
that's
what
what
it
it's
is? It's an easel? Okay, I feel better.
Is that good or is it usually?
What do you young people call that? Is that...
It's an easel.
Is an easel good? Okay.
Young people.
All right, I can
I was feeling
describe,
old.
I can describe what we're here for. We intended originally to be here for an interpretation of the code to be able to allow changing the rear yard where we can't get grass to grow. And I can explain why and the efforts we've taken to get grass to grow, to become an artificial turf. It's, the area is 18 by 35. It's fairly small. Nobody can see it from any neighboring direction. Right now, the water lands on it and it kind of just makes mud out of the efforts to grow the grass. And that it's shady because there's trees along the southern property line that are on the neighbor's property, so we don't have the ability to trim those particularly. So the yard is in shade all the time and the grass just doesn't grow. So it's unusable in its muddiness. So the solution that we want to request, I think it's a variance now is what we're requesting.
So the nature of this application, so the applicant applied for an interpretation from the building inspector's decision that the artificial turf is not permitted under the town zoning law. So the application as it's presented to you is for an appeal of that interpretation, so you can make it you can affirm that determination or you can make a different interpretation of the code. If you affirm the interpretation, you can then consider an application for a variance to decide whether a variance should be granted to allow the artificial turf even though it's prohibited by the code. So this is kind of a two-part application. First the interpretation, and then if the interpretation is an affirmance, then the consideration of a variance.
Okay. Thank you.
So the installation will take place on the right-hand side of the house. The landscaper will come in and cut the sod out, remove it, and then bring in gravel with a wheelbarrow from a bobcat that will be delivered in the front yard. So there'll be 6 inches of crushed stone in the place of where there's just dirt right now that's compacted, and then the AstroTurf gets tacked or pinned into that. We've done a similar thing just recently in Rye where we have a swimming pool and they wanted to have, right on the waterfront, a beautiful home where they wanted AstroTurf by the pool, and it worked out great. It's quite nice on bare feet and clean and easy to keep clean. And the one big improvement will be the stormwater because the surface material itself is 100% permeable, and with the 6 inches of crushed stone underneath it, then that will let water absorb down into the ground rather than right now it tends to wash off towards the south and off the property. I can answer questions, otherwise Jason could describe the efforts in trying to get grass to grow.
Okay, thank you for your summary of your presentation. As a general rule at this point, I will open it to the board for questions or comments, but I just wanted to make, I guess, an initial or introductory comment that this has town-wide precedential value when you're dealing with this type of an interpretation. Maybe I should take a step back. As a board, we're essentially a quasi-appellate review board. We're a tribunal like a court. People that come before us are always looking at something that's at variance with the law. What they're doing is not as of right. So we generally hear, a vast majority of our hearing is on use area variances. We hear use variances seldom, and then we rarely hear interpretation. So Wolfson's explanation about the interpretation and how we find that and how that fits into a variance is very important. Secondly, as it relates to the precedential value that this will have, we judge each application on its own merits according to either a 5 or 3-part test. Here, the decision we make will be town-wide. So, again, we're going to open this up to the board, but I'm definitely going to require from our outside counsel, a legal memorandum on the interpretation, and also our town engineer will give us his input with a memorandum and findings. So having said that, let me allow the board to ask questions or make comments at this juncture. Mr. Cahalan?
Yes, sir. I'm glad you brought that up because I do see it the same way. This would be a precedent-setting application, which we'd have to be very, very careful. It just bothers me that, just because you're going to add 6 inches of gravel doesn't assure turf that it's going to drain the same way. So I understand you want a usable yard, but from the photos, and I didn't get a chance to go by this property, so I can't believe no sunlight gets back there, but you also have, today they have methods with, even on golf courses, where they grow grass where there's shade. So I question that, but, those are my initial thoughts, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cahalan. Mr. Miller, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I just want to hear about the efforts about growing the grass.
Okay. Mr. Conway?
My reaction to the application was, I was a little concerned about stormwater runoff. I mean, you know, in the application, there's been a history of flooding on the property. It's not a very large backyard, so, I'm just concerned where that water is gonna go. And I don't understand, yet whether or not 6 feet of crushed rocks be enough to mitigate any rainwater that's gonna hit the backyard, if that project goes forward. So I guess we'll wait to hear from the town engineer on that.
Sure, yeah. That's when I get to my comments, that's exactly what I'm going to be waiting on.
Okay.
Additionally, under our code, the gravel's deemed to be an impervious surface. So we're actually adding impervious surface to that area. Mr. Weber?
Is it the entire yard, or can you indicate on the picture, is it just the upper left corner? I'm trying to understand how much of the yard has a flood or water issue, or can't grow grass.
The whole yard, but on the plan, if you can see this. This is the house, and this is the deck, this is the driveways here. It's the whole backyard. This is the fence. The neighbors use this as a right-of-way to get to the other house. So it's the whole lawn part of the backyard. And I do have a note that I could read from the engineer.
Sure. If you can from the mic so that they can pick it up. Thank you.
The engineer is Chris Utchig, and he wrote, "Dear Inspector Valente, as you are aware, we have submitted a building permit application to replace the natural rear yard turf with synthetic turf at the referenced property. The application was denied, and we are now pursuing a variance to the code." So I'm reading just what he wrote.
Okay.
In support of the variance request, we would like to point out the benefits of our proposal would have with regarding stormwater runoff from the property. The turf product we are proposing utilizes a fully permeable binding fabric that allows 100% of rainfall to pass through. The underlayment of the turf consists of a 6-inch deep bed of clean stone. The stone has a void ratio of 40%, meaning 40% of the 6-inch stone depths are voids. He puts in parentheses 2.4 inches, available to hold water. Relative to storm events, the stone base will retain 2.4 inches of rainfall. The following is a comparison of the rainfall depths for various storm events and the effective reduction of runoff due to the stored water in the stone bed. So a 25-year storm, he lists smaller storms, but the bigger storm, 25-year storm, the storm runoff is, he puts 6.5 inches. Stored provided by stone bed is 2.4 inches, so it's a percentage reduction of 36.9% reduction in stormwater runoff. As evidenced by the above analysis, the installation of the turf and stone bed will result in a significant reduction in stormwater runoff and will greatly improve the groundwater recharge on the property. And that's from Chris Utchig.
Okay.
Ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if you want, yeah, give that to Mr. Valenti, please.
That was also included in the submission material, so it is part of the record.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we have some further questions from our board. Mr. Weber, do you have anything further?
No, not at this time. And
Mr. Conway?
So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is
Jason has some things to add, if he could.
Of course. But, Mr. Conway, let him have his question first, then we'll have the applicant come up and supplement it, yeah.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understand what you just read to us. I know it's in the record. I can go back and look at it. But is it what you're saying is that the water would stay within the gravel, kind of like a dry well holds the water?
Exactly.
It's
It
going
would
to stay
hold-
there. It won't seep out to the sides. It's going to stay there and then eventually get absorbed into the...
Exactly. It would detain it and give it more time to percolate after the storm event, percolate down into the ground itself rather than wash off quickly, which is what it's doing now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Cahalan?
you know, in recent history, very recent history, you know, it's nice when they talk about 25 years, but we've had the 100-year storm already. And, I mean, I know a lot of part of this town was flooded severely, and up in that area particularly, we had severe flooding on properties, you know. So in a downpour like that, you know, we don't get 2 inches of rain. We get 3 inches of rain, 4 inches of rain, and the way I see it, even though it says it's going to go through, it's still going to run off onto the neighbors' properties. It's still going to go someplace else. I mean, I just don't see this as, you know, I understand you want to have a usable yard, but if we do this, what is somebody else going to do? You know, are they going to ask for a soccer field in their backyard with turf? Are we going to have a 40-yard sprint someplace else? I mean, we have big properties on the other side of town that have tennis courts and everything else, swimming pools. So I'm very, very skeptical about what the engineers say on this, because this town is different. You know, having been here so long and seen so much, that I just don't trust the calculations, Mr. Chairman. That's my own fear, because you drive around, you go behind Town Hall here during a 1-inch storm, and there's puddles everywhere, everywhere.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I heard 2 separate comments just there. Number 1 was about the stormwater management and the ability of on-site retention with this system. And the other is kind of a more policy-based, is whether it's consistent with the character of the community to have this surface. As to the former, we can certainly ask the town engineer to take a look at what is proposed and compare it with the existing condition and provide feedback as to how they would be relative to one another. I think that's probably the comparison that you want to look at.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Also, we have legal constraints here. Number 1, our code definition of gravel and whether it's an impervious surface.
Which our board has determined that it is.
Correct. And then the other, and that's why I'm going to be asking you to write a memorandum later. The other issue is that the interpretation is surrounding the language, which is fairly clear in our statute, that this requires natural landscaping, and I'm not sure how and why we're getting into the weeds unless we address that interpretation, which I'm going to ask the applicant to submit a memorandum to make that argument, because I don't see that addressed anywhere. And I think that's really why we're here. I guess I was being cryptic in my comment earlier, because, again, we're an appellate review board. There was a denial based on our statute, but our statute finds that in this area it requires natural landscaping. And I'm hoping that you can make an argument why that's not correct, but that's really why you're here. So I guess what I'm going to be asking you later is to submit a memorandum on that point. At this point, maybe what I should do is allow the applicant to supplement, and then I'm going to possibly make a motion to open the public hearing, because I think the applicant wants to be heard.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Kalin. All in favor?
Aye.
Would the applicant like to be heard?
Good evening. My name's Jason Malik. I'm the homeowner. Just a few things. The reason why I'm here tonight and want to put in the grass is because of the drainage issues and the water runoff and all that. All the things that you guys are talking about and being concerned about are the very reason why I want to put in artificial turf, to alleviate that problem, not add to the problem. And I'll explain a little bit the history of when we purchased our house and the things that we've been going through with the yard. So we purchased our house in 2016. Since that time, every year we have spent thousands of dollars trying to get the grass in our yard, which is fairly small, to grow and be able to use it. And it has failed every single year. Our landscaper seeds the lawn every year. It looks okay in May, and then by mid to late June, it's gone. It basically turns into compacted mud. We've tried everything. We've spent thousands of dollars. Like I said, we've gone through multiple landscapers. We fired our first one. I think we fired our second one, and the third one still can't get it done. We've done reseedings, thatching, aerating the lawn. We took advice to water more. We then watered less. We then installed a rain sensor to water the perfect amount, and nothing seems to alleviate the problem. Last year, if you recall, the board approved a project where we installed a porch in our backyard. After we did the porch, we figured, let's go for it all. Let's completely just resod the entire lawn and put in new sod, new grass. All that was gone within a month and a half, just gone. It was just basically turned into mud. And the result is twofold. The first one is obviously we have no backyard, which is what we thought we would be getting when we purchased the house. And I have a 4-year-old daughter now, and I'd love to be able to run around in the yard with her. Respectfully, I'm not looking to put in a soccer field or a baseball field. I just want a small piece of grass to run around with my daughter, and so she's not covered with mud at the end of the day. It's a pretty humble ask. I understand the value of precedent. I am a lawyer myself. If we go the variance route instead of the interpretation route, then it's really just a fact-based situation and not necessarily something that I think would have at least ramifications in terms of reinterpreting the code for the town-wide, and talking about just acknowledging that the variance prohibits, say, anything that's not a natural turf, but in the circumstances, a variance would be warranted. The other thing, and I'm saving this for last because I think it's obviously the most important based on what we're talking about, is just the compacted mud and the storm water runoff. It's creating huge issues both for myself and my neighbors. The yard is essentially always wet. It doesn't matter how often it has rained over the last week. If there's been any amount of rain in the last 2 weeks, you walk in the yard, it is wet. And when it does rain, the water runs right off. It doesn't absorb. It puddles and it goes straight towards the neighbors. I'm getting some echoing. The Tedesco's house in the back of the yard, and to Forest Sprague, it goes straight down to them. And I can even show you in one of the pictures.
You can take the microphone with you. Yeah.
Break it. Okay. Oh, it's not. Do you have the pictures?
I think it's behind.
Okay. This way. So this right here is the back corner of the yard. So this, basically, behind this fence is the Tedesco's, and here's the Taminos. Okay? So the yard sort of slopes down that way, and it goes straight into their yard. So the compacted mud is causing the drainage issues, and what I'm trying to do is solve that, while at the same time having a yard that I can actually use with my daughter. The other problem is, you can see here, the yard sort of slopes down this way, and it goes towards my basement. And so anytime there's significant rain, my basement floods. And it's another reason why we're getting flooding issues, stormwater issues, not only for my neighbors, but also for myself. So, and that's, putting in artificial turf was the last thing I wanted to do, but I feel like I have no choice. Otherwise, I'm dealing with just a yard that's essentially all mud. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I don't think Dan mentioned this in his presentation. So I think there's two causes to the problem. One of them is the trees that are behind the fence. So we did try trimming them. I can trim them to the extent that they're hanging over my fence. But the issue with the trees is not the overhang, it's the height. So in the summer, when those trees grow leaves, that yard gets zero sunlight, zero. It's basically maybe a few minutes of sunlight, the sun passes over, and then it's behind the trees. So those pictures, actually what you're seeing is, I think those pictures might be in the fall when the leaves are down. But in the summer, when the grass grows, no sunlight on the yard. The other issue, and we found this out last year when we were digging pylons to install the deck. I believe 2, 4, and 6 Sprague Road used to be a different structure. There was, I think it was one lot, and there was a house in the back of it, and I think there was a driveway. So when the construction company was there, when that contractor was there to dig up the pylons, they dug a few inches, and they had dirt. And then after a couple of inches of dirt, it was all concrete and landfill. So as it turns out, decades ago, when those lots were chopped up, and I assume that this board, the predecessors to this board approved the plan, whatever that developer was, long before I owned the house, put landfill underneath that yard. So just a few inches of soil and then just a landfill. They dug it up, it was all just concrete and dust. And so at that point, that was another aha moment for me where we thought, well, no wonder grass doesn't grow. There's no land for it to grow on. The yard itself is essentially artificial. And so I think there's really two things. There's the natural, there's the lack of any sunlight, but there's also something very unique is that there's essentially landfill underneath my yard. And that could explain why my front yard grows just fine, but my backyard doesn't. It's just causing problems for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for the, I guess, amplification of your application and to give the board a little more understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve. At this point, I'm going to make a motion to open this matter to the public. Is there a second?
We did that.
Did I do that?
No.
No. I'll second
No, it doesn't hurt to do it again. You second it, Mr. Miller?
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, would anyone from the public like to be heard? Please come forward, give me your name and address for the record, and please proceed.
I was going to say, I hope it's not the other neighbor. Not going to be happy.
Hi, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm Peter Telesco. I live at 892 Post Road. I'm the neighbor with the trees. So 2, 4, and 6 Sprague Road were one lot years ago. The main house was knocked down, 3 were built, so their backyards butt up against my side, the side of my property. 2 of them are in my backyard. They're 4 feet higher than I am. So there's a retaining wall there. They're 4 feet higher. As we all know, and it was discussed tonight, stormwater management, mitigation, runoff is a tremendous problem in the town of Eastchester these days. Watch a town board, and it's spoken about at every meeting. Unfortunately, since 2020, I've been dealing with stormwater runoff from Jason's neighbor. He did work. I was assured there are plenty of dry wells, this is good, it was engineer approved, blah, blah, blah. No, tell me about that when the water's coming in my yard. So right now, every time it rains, I'm outside. Where's the water coming from? Where's the water coming from? And I have yet to see water come from Jason's property. I'm very happy about that. I'm glad about that. I don't want to see water come from his property. I understand his plight with his yard. My concern is that engineers can say this, and they can promise that, and we're putting gravel, we're putting dry wells, and what if the problem is worse? Where is the water going? It's coming 4 feet down to my property. I can't have that. I can't have that. So I need to know what assurances do I have that if this is approved, this engineer is correct, that the gravel and whatever else is there is going to keep the water off of my property. We know when the job is done, it's going to be pitched away from their house towards the back corner, which is my property. So right off the bat, I've got a strike against me. Where do we go? When do I have protection that whatever is done there, I can sleep comfortably and I cannot worry about water coming onto my property? As far as the lack of grass. I've been associated with the landscaping business my entire life. I'm not a landscaper. I have many landscaping customers. I have a repair shop. I repair their equipment. My yard has the trees around it. My yard is predominantly shade. I do not use fertilizers, pesticides, or herbicides in my backyard. I have got a green lawn. It's lawn, it's weeds, it's whatever, but it's green. You can walk through it. It's not mud, it's lawn. I personally think the issue is what was just stated, whatever's underneath, that landfill. You have lawn in May when the temperatures are cool, it cools off at night. Once the temperatures get warm, that stone is hot from the daily temperatures. It burns the roots of the grass and it dies. I don't think it's the shade. And I mean, there are so many grass seed out there now that are made for dense shade, for full sun. I think the problem is the landfill underneath his soil, and that's unfortunate, but I need protection, I need assurances, I need to know what happens if this is approved and I get water dumping on my yard. Who rectifies it? Who takes care of it? What do I do? What are my steps? And I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Mr. Cahalan?
Mr. Telesco, can you go
Mr.
back
Telesco, would you like to come back? Yeah, please, if you don't mind. One of the board members has a question of you.
So, Mr. Telesco, the current state of your yard, based upon the neighbor that had completely paved over his grass, how is that situation? Had that been rectified?
No.
So he still has
No.
all his pavers?
When I see the weather forecast that we're going to get 2 to 3 inches of rain, I'm outside with a pump, trying to figure out what am I going to do to get the water out if it comes in.
Has the retaining wall fell yet? Because the last time I was there, to
It's
visit your
in the
property,
process. It's cracked
it
and
was
it's
cracking
breaking.
and cracking.
One at a time. The stenographer's not going to be able to understand anything. Can you repeat that, Mr. Cahalan?
So when I visited that property during the last application or the time they came for the last variance, that wall was in tough shape, and I went up there when it was raining and got on the property and looked at what was going on. And, you know, it's sad, and that's why I had my comments, because, you know, that application has stuck with me. Now it's been 2 or 3 years that's been going on. I know we have to balance what one neighbor wants and what the other one wants, but there was truly damage that hasn't been rectified to this gentleman's property, has not been rectified. And now we have somebody else coming in saying, I understand, I want to use my yard, but I could have runoff, and who's it going to impact? Mr. Telesco again? Now, how fair is that?
Yeah, I think that goes to the analysis that you want to ask the town engineer. What is the condition as it existing right now, and how will what's being proposed compared to it? You know, I don't think you can say in any rain circumstance whatsoever will there be no runoff. That's really not the standard that the engineer applies. What you'd want to look at is what's existing and how will it compare to what is being proposed.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Mr. Telesco, thank you for your time. Before you do that, I don't see anyone else here to be heard, so if the applicant would like to come up and reply to that, he may.
Yeah, nothing to add to reply. I mean, I totally understand his concerns. They're perfectly legitimate. Just one more thing with respect to the interpretation versus the variance. You had suggested that you'd be asking for a legal memo on the interpretation. I mean, I'm kind of hearing loud and clear that probably the interpretation is probably not I don't think it's going to get a receptive audience. I mean, if we just went the variance route, would that simplify things? It sounds like that would be the case.
Ms. Wilson?
Sure, so it's definitely your choice whether you want to pursue the interpretation or whether you'd like to withdraw that aspect of your application and pursue only the variance. It sounds to me from the board's perspective, like in any circumstance, they're going to want the town engineer to review the application.
Yeah.
But that's up to that's totally your decision about the interpretation.
Okay. Maybe we'll think about that. But
Yeah, I would, if you don't mind, I think you should take that under advisement, because the way Mrs. Wolfson has packaged this, the interpretation and the decision upon the interpretation is not going to prevent the variance application from being heard. So am I correct? It's not going to change the timing either.
Sure. Basically, if you withdraw the interpretation, you accept that that is the correct interpretation of the code, and then you're seeking the variance from it by applying the statutory area variance standard that we've been discussing based on the 5 factors.
Sure, okay. So assuming that the zoning law says that you can't have this, but the variance, our application is that, understanding that we want an exception to the law.
Correct. The variance application is, the zoning law imposes this area requirement, but it also has a standard to allow this board to vary it in cases of hardship, and there's, the statutory test that we've been discussing.
Understood. Okay. I mean, I think that all sounds good. In terms of the engineer, I think your comment is correct, is that the key is what is the delta between what's happening today versus what would happen if we installed the turf? And I think that should be the key question, because what's happening today is just not acceptable to me. It shouldn't be acceptable to my neighbors, and I think if this was just replacing natural grass in a place that was draining water, absorbing water just fine, then yeah, why would I be doing that? But that's obviously not why I'm here. And whether it's the shade or whether it's the landfill, I don't know. I'm not an expert. Maybe the gentleman is correct. Maybe it is the landfill. And if it is the landfill, then that, to me, is even more supportive of the fact that this is kind of a unique circumstance. It's not really a precedent-setting situation. We're not really talking about a natural yard in the first place. We're talking about grass on top of what's essentially a fake yard that I ended up purchasing that, frankly, I didn't know at the time. I don't know if it ever was disclosed to me, but.
Thank you. I have a couple of board members that have some questions or comments. Mr. Weber first.
Have you tried installing any drainage or dry wells so far to prevent any of it?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Have you tried installing any drains or dry wells yourself on your property yet? I know you mentioned the landscaping, but any of your own drainage?
So we actually wanted to install a dry well in the backyard as part of the deck project, but we were told that we couldn't because the dry well would not be at least 10 feet from the property line. Mm-hmm. So there was no place in the yard because the deck extended out. There was no 10-foot space. There was no place to put it that was at least 10 feet. So what we had to do is we had to install a dry well in the front of the yard that's connected to a drainage system, roof leaders that collect stormwater from the top of the deck and route it around the front of the house to the front dry well. So that's what we did. But we thought, yeah, maybe if we put it in a dry well, it might actually improve that backyard, but we weren't allowed to.
Okay, Mr. Miller, you had something?
Just a thought. Have you attempted to remove a few layers of the landfill and put some fresh dirt in there?
When they dug down there, it was so deep. It was basically there was just a few inches of soil, and then they spent hours and hours trying to dig it out. I don't know how that would be done. Okay. That would be a massive construction project to dig that out. I don't know how deep it goes.
Okay, fair enough.
It was they dug those piles. I don't remember. They dug the piles very, very deep. I wanted like a really secure deck because the old one was rickety, and they dug very, very deep, and they did not get past the landfill. It was all crushed stuff.
Anything further?
No.
Okay, anyone else on the board have any questions or comments? Mrs. Wolfson?
I just have one other thing. Do you want any information about the material itself, what color it is, what it looks like, what its useful life is, things like
As long
that?
as it's not orange.
So I'm kicking myself because I had a note to self and to bring a swath of the grass, and of course I forgot. It doesn't look like, if you think of the old AstroTurf days in the Houston Astrodome, it doesn't look like that. It looks like grass. If you were looking at it from afar, you would think it was grass. And it actually, the part that I chose or that I want to install has like pieces of little brown in it, so it looks like a natural grass. It doesn't look like this perfect, every blade is perfectly green. So it looks pretty natural. I wouldn't, it's not something that's tiny grass like a putting green or anything like that. It would have the length of real grass.
Okay. Well, seeing that we're going to have, we're leaving the public hearing open, and we're going to be having substantially more material to look at, let me summarize this. I'm going to invite or encourage you to submit a memorandum on what your legal arguments as to the interpretation, because I respect your comments, but there has been no decision yet on that. So if you have an argument to be made about that, I'd ask you to do that, along with some supporting material on the 5-part test as it relates to the area variance. We're going to have the town engineer provide us with a memorandum, findings in a memorandum, and our outside counsel, Mrs. Wolfson, is going to give us a legal memorandum on not only the interpretation, but issues related to the variance.
Yeah, and you can decide, if you ultimately decide that you do not want to proceed with the interpretation, you could just send in an email to the planning department withdrawing that aspect. That's completely up to you. But you just decide how you want to handle that for your next submission.
Right.
And there was just one other question that I heard that I actually think is a good question for consideration, but does the material have, I think it's called crumb rubber, or that softening material that's in turf fields?
No.
There's nothing within it that makes it soft.
Wait, you mean this, so I think maybe I'm misunderstanding the question. You know, if you're on a ball field, a turf ball field, would you kick the thing and then there's like rubber beads?
Correct.
No, I don't think.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So just kind of put a bow on this for now, my commentary earlier about the precedential value of your application really has to do with the interpretation, because our finding would be townwide as it relates to the interpretation. As it relates to the area variance, that is sui generis. It's unique to your application. You have a 5-part test, and you'll make that your arguments along with what seems to be the concern, which is the mitigation and water runoff, but it'll be unique to your application. So there's no preconceived notion here. You're looking to solve a problem. You know, we know the old maxim, you decide not based on the applicant, but the application, because the applicant is a very sympathetic figure who's dealing with a problem, who's been here 8 years, who's made a commitment to the community, he's raising his family here, and 3 times a year you write that check for real estate taxes. So we understand that. So you're not here because you're being cross-examined. That part of the application really has to do with the interpretation, because, again, the statute to me is fairly clear as it relates to what has to be there. The words natural landscaping are fairly clear, but again, you'll make your argument. I think that's it for now. I'm going to make a motion to adjourn the application with those materials.
Chairman,
Counselor,
just
sorry.
one thing that I wanted to clarify. With respect to a memorandum from your engineer, is that going to involve testing at the site? I think one of the issues seems to be unclear as to whether or not the landfill is causing the problem or it is a drainage issue based on the shade. And is this going to be, are you going to be requesting that the engineer offer a memorandum based upon the type of product and how it absorbs or runs off or drains? Or are they going to go out to the site and,
Good point, Counselor. Maybe we should have parameters on that so that we're not running off in different directions. Mrs. Wolfson?
Sure. So typically what we would do is we would send the engineering analysis prepared by the applicant's engineer to our consulting engineer, and he would review it and comment. And our engineer is not going to perform any invasive testing. He will coordinate with the applicant's engineer to review the information submitted and give you an evaluation of its accuracy or if any changes are needed.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I would like all that information addressed.
I'm sorry, Mr. McCallan?
I think what council said, all of those items are relevant to this application.
Oh, absolutely.
So the engineers need to determine if it is the ground, if it is this, or if it is that. I think if they don't tell us, how will we know?
My point was whether it is the applicant's engineer that does this and the town's engineer reviews what they do is one issue. The other is, what is the scope of what the town's engineer is going to be reviewing? I think that is something that the board really needs to...
I think we've resolved that.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your application. Okay. Next item on new business. This is application 24-21. This is 85 Highland Avenue. While you're setting up, this is a secret type 2 action. No further seeker review is required under this application.
Okay. Good evening. My name is John Yanacito. I'm an architect, and I'm representing Mr. and Mrs. Plumage, the owners of the subject property. We are proposing a second-story addition over the existing first-floor footprint of the existing two-family residence located at 83 Highland Avenue. The existing building is currently non-conforming with respect to the maximum permitted ridge height. The proposed addition will create one additional non-conforming condition, so we're requesting 2 area variances this evening. The first is for the maximum ridge height, where the maximum permitted ridge height is 33 feet. The existing ridge height is 36.38 feet, and the proposed is 35 feet. And then the second area variance is for the total gross floor area, where the maximum permitted floor area is 3,356 square feet, and the proposed is 3,740 square feet, an increase of 384 square feet, or 11.4%. Just going to go over to the drawings real quickly. So here we have the site plan. The existing property is an oversized lot. It's over 15,000 square feet in a zone that typically requires a minimum 5,000 square foot lot. The proposed addition is highlighted here. It will be built over the existing first floor footprint, and it will meet all the required setbacks and the building coverage requirements and the coverage requirements. And then here we have the exterior elevation. So the area highlighted in red is the second-story addition, and then the roof line here is showing the relationship between the existing and the new, and showing that the new ridge line is going to be slightly lower than the existing, which is currently non-conforming. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Yanacito. I'll go to the board. I'll start in a different direction this time. Mr. Weber, do you have anything?
I do not.
Mr. Conway?
Nothing for me.
Mr. Miller?
Nope, John was his usual concise self.
Wow, big compliment. Mr. Cahalan?
Just why couldn't it be conforming?
I'm sorry?
Why couldn't the new ridge line be conforming?
It could. I think the reason I did it this way, just to match the existing pitch on from the existing house. So the new pitch will match the existing slope, and I think it just ties in nicer rather than having this lower roof with the different pitch.
Okay, thank you.
It's an aesthetic thing. If the ridge height, and since the ridge height, the new ridge height is going to be lower than the existing non-conforming, I figured it was not making the non-conforming condition any worse than what it was. So we decided to go with that roof pitch.
Okay. That's,
Anything further, Mr. Cahalan?
No.
Okay, well, I make a motion to open the public hearing on this matter. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Would anyone from the public like to be heard? Okay, seeing no one coming forward, I make a motion to close the public hearing on this matter. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, back to the board. Mr. Cahalan?
Nothing.
Mr. Miller?
None.
Ms. Conway?
Nothing.
Mr. Weber?
Nope.
Dionicio, I think you've, to my satisfaction, answered the 5-part test, and the requests are de minimis. They're in character with the neighborhood. You're going over a footprint that's already there, so it's certainly not a detriment. So I make a motion to adjourn this matter for resolution at the next meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the summer.
You too. And in line with that comment, I do have one more motion, and my motion is to adjourn the July meeting to September. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Mr. Miller, all in favor?
Aye.
Good summer to everybody. We will see you at the September meeting.